to do. I promise.
But at the same time, you cannot compare a friend to a husband. The husband is gonna be above anyone.
He asked for separate rooms. On Valentine's Day. On a trip that was supposed to mark a new beginning between them. That one sentence hit harder than any on-screen meltdown Jasmine's ever had. And it wasn't rage this time. It was quiet, controlled devastation. You could see it in her face. The hurt wasn't loud, but it was permanent. That's when viewers started to realize this wasn't 90-day dysfunction like before. This was the beginning of something final. This is Oliva, and you're watching Reality Sport, where we break down the drama you noticed, and the truth they didn't want you to. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hey, tell me in the comments, was it already over for Jasmine and Gino before Valentine's? Because from that moment on, things unraveled in silence. No tell-all blowout, no social media shady captions, no apology tours. She just vanished. The woman who was once front and center on your screen every week disappeared like a glitch in the franchise. Fans kept scrolling for updates that never came. TLC didn't explain a thing. And then the signs started piling up. Promos that featured Jasmine heavily? Suddenly edited. Clips removed. Remember that special that was teased months earlier? Quietly scrapped. TLC marketers who used to boost her with every episode just stopped mentioning her. No guest appearances, no cast interactions, no tagged stories, nothing. And when Jasmine's name did come up online, it was vague, confusing, like people were dancing around the real story they weren't allowed to say out loud. What happened to the woman who gave us some of the rawest, messiest, most meme-able scenes in franchise history? The one who flipped out at Gino over Instagram follows? Who broke down in therapy? Who cried, screamed, kissed, fought, and repeated, all in HD? No exit storyline. No closure. Not even a typical farewell interview. It was like her reality TV identity got wiped with a click. Publicly, Jasmine's last act was heartbreak. Privately, it might have been damage control. People assumed she needed a break, that she was drained. Some even speculated she was off healing, working on herself, or waiting out drama with Gino. But if you look closer, it doesn't line up. You don't vanish like that unless the vanishing is done for you. There weren't breaks. There was a shutdown. Ever notice how the most dramatic 90-day splits aren't filmed, but deleted? Production sources, some anonymous, others dodging NDAs, started whispering. Her name became a red flag. Not because of what she did on camera, but because of what started happening off it. Behind the scenes. In meetings. Legal ones. Not creative. Was this just about viewer fatigue or a last-minute pivot? Or had Jasmine crossed into territory that made her not only unfilmable, but untouchable? Because if this was about relationship drama, TLC would have milked it. They've aired worse. If it was burnout, she could have said that. But when a high-profile cast member disappears with no statement from the network and no social media push from the franchise, that's not a coincidence. That's strategic silence. And silence this thick covers something big. But this wasn't just a breakup or burnout. This was something TLC didn't want airing. Behind every viral fight and over-the-top confessionals, there's a set crew on the other side of the camera, silently bracing. And if whispers from inside the production are even half true, working with Jasmine wasn't just unpredictable. It was exhausting, draining. Some describe the atmosphere as emotionally tense and logistically chaotic every single day she was on set. Sources say her scenes took longer to film, and not in a creative way. Tempers flared, emotions spiraled, and entire schedules reportedly had to revolve around managing her mood. Imagine trying to keep a filming block on track, only for one cast member to derail it by going off script in the middle of every scene. You don't reset that chaos. You roll with it until you can't anymore. Now, let's be clear. None of this is a judgment on Jasmine as a person. This isn't about her accent, her background, or her looks. This is about the behavior that played out on screen and behind the scenes. We all watched moments of explosive reactions, wild jealousy, sudden breakdowns. That's all part of why she shot to fame. But insiders now claim those moments weren't isolated. They were constant. And eventually, they stopped helping the show and started hurting production. Because in the cold math of reality TV formulas, a cast member who brings drama is an asset until the drama doesn't serve the timeline, or the contract, or the lawyers. And Jasmine, according to multiple people connected to the series, was teetering on that line for a while. One former crew member reportedly described it like this: "You could get the gold from her scenes, but you'd pay with hours of chaos to extract 2 usable minutes." Think about that for a second. That's not entertainment anymore. That's crisis management behind a ring light. The wildest part? TLC didn't cut her for that. Not for a long time. She was too watchable. Focus groups loved her. Social media couldn't stop talking. Every eye roll, meltdown, accusation, clickbait magic. So they kept her on. But with rules, with edits, with more post-production than most cast members ever need. Allegedly, producers began slicing up her scenes differently in later seasons, not to make her look better, but to control potential fallout. Entire conflicts were shortened. Certain words never made it in. Things that flared way beyond what was expected? Trimmed to look like ordinary Jasmine behavior, symptomatic of a bigger strategy. Editing not for storytelling, but for liability. Because once the network feels exposed, not emotionally, but legally, they stop thinking in seasons and start thinking in lawsuits. So if they kept filming, what weren't they allowed to show you? Turns out, the Jasmine drama the fans saw wasn't the drama TLC was worried about. Because according to multiple insiders, what started with emotional outbursts on set quietly turned into something much heavier. Something that had nothing to do with Gino, jealousy, or Instagram DMs. People close to production started hearing about travel-related paperwork issues behind the scenes. Not just flight mix-ups or late visas. Actual red flag concerns tied to international logistics, permits, and documentation. Things that sound boring until you realize they were serious enough to stop production meetings cold. Allegedly, legal teams started getting involved, not to negotiate more screen time, but to figure out whether Jasmine's continued presence was a liability. The focus shifted fast. This wasn't about whether she was too emotional to handle. It was about whether she was even legally allowed to continue filming or stay in the country. Meetings became quiet, controlled. Not about what scenes to cut, but what scenes couldn't legally exist at all. And suddenly, producers weren't calling her. Lawyers were. Talent coordinators faded out. Communications rerouted. And the most telling sign of all? No contract extensions. No press teasers about her next season. Renewals that should have been locked during filming stayed open-ended. This wasn't a dramatic firing. It was something much colder. In the entertainment world, they don't always cut you. Sometimes they just stop calling. One day, you're the face of a whole sub-franchise. The next, your email inbox goes silent. Quiet disengagement, not because you're done with them, but because they're done with you. And saying so out loud would only trigger mess they don't want aired in court. This tactic isn't new, but it's effective when a company suspects legal heat is coming. Avoiding public conflict means avoiding public accountability. And when legal exposure is in play, no one wants to be the person who made it worse. That's why Jasmine's exit didn't come with an official goodbye or a flashy post-show interview. She wasn't given the farewell treatment others got. No farewell episode, no cast send-off, just a quiet exit that fans were supposed to interpret as a break. But insiders say it wasn't a break. It was a containment strategy. When even reality producers stop yelling and call the lawyers, you know something's broken. So once the yelling stopped, the story changed. Jasmine wasn't being written out. She was being sidelined legally, slowly faded from credits, not for ratings reasons, but because keeping her front and center became too risky. But that leads to the bigger question. She was controversial, yes, but popular, profitable, a franchise favorite. So what made her radioactive? At first, no one wanted to believe it. Jasmine wasn't missing. She was just offline. Maybe she needed space. Maybe TLC was rebranding. Maybe the producers were saving her for a bigger story arc. Fans came up with every theory, except the one that now appears to be the most likely. She wasn't silent by choice. She was silent because she had to be. Multiple sources with knowledge of production, contracts, and legal complications now allege that Jasmine Pineda didn't just disappear from 90 Day Fiancé, she was removed from the United States entirely. Not as a punishment, not with sirens or a public scene, but in the cold, methodical way legal systems operate when deadlines quietly expire and paperwork crosses the wrong desks. Let's unpack this carefully. There's a difference between being arrested and being removed. And by all reports, Jasmine was not arrested at the time. What insiders suggest happened is that her immigration status reached a point where she could no longer remain in the U.S. legally. And once that point was reached, she either had to leave voluntarily or risk something far worse. This wasn't a social media stunt. It wasn't a dramatic public ousting. It was discreet, private, and it stunned people inside the industry because it meant TLC had been airing a story where not everyone behind the scenes was legally compliant to continue. And remember, 90 Day Fiancé's entire franchise is built around immigration timelines. They film the chaos of moving countries, adjusting to a new culture, meeting family, planning weddings under visa pressure, so they know exactly who is and isn't cleared to stay. Which makes this even more shocking, because Jasmine wasn't some background character. She was a lead, a walking clip machine. And if she really faced removal, that means the people in charge either didn't catch it or did and couldn't fix it in time. The silence wasn't for suspense, it may have been a legal strategy. While all this was reportedly happening off camera, fans were watching her feed fall apart in real time. First, she posted sentimental photos. Then confessional captions, heavy with guilt, fear, and vague references to betrayal. No names, no accusations. But the emotional tone was clear: regret, panic, rage. One picture was tagged in a location far from her usual spots. Another post hinted at making peace with being alone. Then, suddenly, half of them vanished, deleted or rewritten. Inconsistent timelines. No replies to concerned DMs. And her usual chaotic energy? Gone. There's a pattern in how public figures post when they're in real trouble. Not celebrity drama, but real life, contract level, maybe shouldn't be online right now trouble. The captions get longer. The tone gets uneven. The images start to feel like they're coming from a different part of the world, not just physically, but emotionally. And according to social media analysts who monitor influencer crisis behavior, Jasmine's profile started matching those markers almost exactly. Fans thought she was just going through it with Gino again. That maybe he cut her off financially. Or she was taking a break from public pressure. Some thought she was having an identity crisis after TV fame. But what if all those surface-level changes were just symptoms? What if the real cause was off camera, in the form of legal paperwork she couldn't publicly discuss? If removal happened, it would hit harder than almost anything else. Imagine building your entire brand around your life in another country. Your partner, your job, your dreams of staying, and then finding out none of it holds up legally. Logistically, deportation or forced removal puts someone into free fall. Rerouting plans. Wrecking income streams. Leaving behind contracts that legally can't be completed. Emotionally, it's much worse. Publicly humbling. Isolating. You're not only cut off from opportunity, you're stripped of everything you branded yourself around. And adding to that emotional wreckage is the silence from everyone who once built you up. TLC said absolutely nothing. No support post. No strong PR denial. They didn't try to control the story. They buried it. You can tell by the vacuum. Her absence was too vacant. Nothing rushed to fill her space, because filling it would mean naming it. And nobody wanted to say why she left. Producers may have known halfway through filming that her time on the show was over, whether or not cameras were still rolling. And if those decisions were coming from multiple departments, casting, legal, compliance, then Jasmine's edit wasn't meant to launch her. It was meant to manage her departure. A controlled fade out. Just enough content to complete a season. Nothing that would encourage future investment. Think of it like this. Her storyline didn't end. It was quietly edited into extinction. Her early appearances were wild and messy and magnetic. Later, she felt more isolated, and so did her storylines. Moments that should have spiraled into big, chaotic TV moments were trimmed down or cut altogether. Then, she was gone. And when content disappears from a reality show, it usually isn't creative. It's legal. Because producers don't delete good content unless the person in it becomes a legal risk. By the time fans started asking where she went, the legal wheels had probably been spinning for weeks, maybe months. Insiders now claim Jasmine wasn't waiting for a contract. She wasn't on vacation. She wasn't recovering from emotional drama. She was out. Not ghosted, not unavailable, legally gone. But deportation wasn't even the worst part. Fans didn't know. She still wasn't in the clear. After the rumors of deportation began to settle, fans expected some kind of resolution. A statement. A denial. Anything. But nothing came. And that's where the whispers took a darker turn. Not because people were looking for drama, but because the silence was starting to feel dangerous. Several sources familiar with immigration protocol and entertainment law began to quietly suggest something more serious. Jasmine might not be cleared from her legal situation. In fact, they said, she could be facing consequences that still haven't hit the public stage yet. Not criminal in the typical tabloid sense, but serious enough that she allegedly can't return to the U.S. without triggering a legal review, or worse. Let's clarify. Facing arrest in situations like this doesn't mean someone is on the run or being hunted. In immigration and civil compliance matters, it often means a person is subject to orders or potential detainment based on unresolved legal circumstances. It might involve missed deadlines, broken agreements, or administrative consequences from failing to meet visa-related requirements. Some call it a ticking clock. Others call it limbo. For Jasmine, this seems to have translated into a complete pullback, not just from production, but from the public. After being hypervisible for so long, she suddenly began limiting what she posted online. Gone were the day-in-the-life selfies, the unfiltered rants, the reactive stories. Instead, she started posting curated, strange content that didn't match anything fans were used to seeing. Her location started looking unfamiliar. Then, captions started getting weird. Vague references like, "can't speak yet," or "everything changes soon." Post after post would vanish hours later. Some were rewritten awkwardly mid-conversation, like someone had taken the keyboard from her. Fans who'd been following her story closely noticed it immediately. Jasmine has always been emotional, but she was never cryptic. That wasn't her style. It led to a flood of speculation. Was she being silenced? Was she hiding? Was she under pressure from someone? And more urgently, was she okay? Sources who claim to have worked with her legal representatives say the change in tone wasn't accidental. They believe Jasmine was advised to minimize her social presence. Words could be used against her. Posts could be interpreted as public statements in cases where silence was smarter than spin. That's why nothing was clarified, denied, or even acknowledged. This is where fans started arguing. Some believe she was in hiding for her mental health. Some accused Gino of cutting her off emotionally and financially, leaving her isolated. Others pushed tinfoil theories that TLC was protecting her due to internal misconduct. A few even claimed she was setting up a rebrand. But none of those theories fully align with the pattern. Because when someone goes from being overexposed to disappearing completely, it's rarely about a brand pivot. It's about legal heat. When every move could trigger consequences, silence isn't weakness. It's protection. This wasn't storyline stress anymore. This was her real life and real law. Which makes the situation more chilling than any tabloid gossip. Because if the rumors are true, she's not free. Not in the career sense. Not in the legal sense. And certainly not in the emotional one. One source who spent time handling immigration red flags for reality talent said it like this: she's not walking away from anything. She's waiting. Waiting for what, though? The next step? A clearance that might not come? Or for someone to make a move that forces everything back into the spotlight? She can't officially speak. The show won't say anything. And with no documentation being released publicly, there's nothing concrete to grab hold of except the growing sense that this isn't over. Not even close. According to insiders, Jasmine wasn't cleared. She wasn't free of drama, or law, or risk. She was cornered. 1 minute, Jasmine was trending. Twitter threads dissecting her outfits. Instagram reels mocking her meltdowns. Reaction channels couldn't get enough of her chaotic chemistry with Gino. Love her or hate her, she was the moment. Then overnight, she wasn't. No headline, no closure. No farewell post or final confessional. Just gone. That instant shift from screen saturation to digital ghosting shattered whatever brand momentum she had. When reality TV stars fall out publicly, they usually cash in. Tell all interviews, juicy exclusives, a few petty podcast appearances, the whole cycle. But in Jasmine's case, none of that happened. It's not that she passed on the spotlight. It's that the circuits that amplify reality talent didn't even try to reach her. Brand deals? Gone. TLC checks? Allegedly stopped cold. Merch pushes, shout-outs, even sponsored teeth whitening links, all dried up. And that's not because she lost followers. She had plenty. People were still watching, still asking where she went. The interest was there. The industry wasn't. Even the gossip blogs that usually feed off 90-day drama went quiet. That's not apathy, it's avoidance. Outlets that live on mess don't go quiet unless there's risk involved. Not in today's click economy. If even tabloids are steering clear, that means someone with authority might have whispered, "Don't go there." Which raises the question, was she quietly blacklisted? You don't have to be banned formally to be frozen out. All it takes is one red flag tied to legal caution or contract disputes, and your name becomes unmentionable. Not officially canceled, but surrounded by enough heat that no one wants to touch it. Not even for headlines. And Jasmine, someone who once flooded every corner of reality commentary, was now missing from the very chaos she helped fuel. That kind of erasure isn't just career ending. It leaves a psychic bruise. Think about it. Your emotions, your heartbreaks, your worst instincts, broadcast to millions. Every week. Then, when it all collapses behind the scenes, the people who once held the cameras turn them off and walk away. No support, no warning, no parachute. From iconic to irrelevant, without even a slap to cry on. Behind every Instagram post going silent is a person staring at unpaid invoices. Rent, legal fees, emotional whiplash. Jasmine's fame depended entirely on being seen. Then, When she needed that visibility to survive, it all vanished. Not because she changed, because the game decided she was no longer useful. And the where shows. People close to her, or who monitor her online patterns, notice the shift. Fewer smiles. Dead-eyed selfies. Budget changed completely. A few fan pages said, "She's glowing," but most saw through it. Jasmine wasn't rebranding. She was surviving. Sad captions replaced sass. The girl who once bragged big now dropped hints about betrayal and heartbreak. Not loud anymore. Heavy. That's the thing about silence on social media. It's loud. Louder than hate. When Gino used to be the target, Jasmine knew how to manipulate it. She'd screenshot hate comments, subtly play victim to stir sympathy, then flip that into engagement. She was a master at turning conflict into currency. Now there was nothing to flip. Because now the comments weren't mean. They just weren't there. When the comments stop, the silence hits harder than the hate ever did. Jasmine's story feels unique, but only because she was famous. In reality, her case is a brutal reminder of how fragile this space is, especially for international cast members. These people uproot their lives, chase better futures on contract promises, and sign deals that put their personal relationships under a microscope. If something goes wrong, paperwork, legal mishap, internal red tape, there's no fallback. Their entire existence depends on being legally allowed to stay. And legally allowed to be interesting. But when legal risk meets emotional volatility, the production machine grinds to a halt. Quietly. The cast member is cut loose. Not with flames. Not with scandal. With silence. The scariest part? There are probably more stories like this brewing. How many Jasmines are currently smiling through confessionals while off-camera their paperwork is in limbo? How many explosive villains are one email away from removal? How many emotionally unstable scenes are actually hiding logistical emergencies no one can say on air? Because Jasmine's downfall wasn't just about drama. And it wasn't just about her. It's about the structure behind these shows. 90 Day Fiancé turns real marriages into entertainment, with international legal implications baked into the format. And it doesn't protect the person when those implications become more than TV. The entire immigrant partner setup is a pressure cooker. But the second that pressure cracks the show's legal liability, they disappear you. Doesn't matter if viewers love you or not. That's what makes Jasmine's case so uncomfortable to watch unravel. Not because she's perfect, she's not. Not because she's blameless, nobody is. But because she was edited for our entertainment one day and edited out the next. Not because her storyline got boring. Because her presence became a problem. She probably still scrolls and sees the memes. Search her name, and there's still discourse. But she's not part of it anymore. She's been reduced to a cautionary tale without a footnote. No reunion appearance. No redemption arc. No warning. The story wasn't over. It was being buried. There's a point where spectacle stops being entertainment and starts feeling like exploitation. Watching Jasmine's rise and sudden erasure forces us to ask where that line really is, and whether anyone behind the scenes actually cares when it's crossed. She was unpredictable, volatile, wildly emotional. That's not even up for debate. It's literally why the camera loved her. But it's also why it feels so dirty now, looking back at how much that volatility was used. Clipped, recut, memed, enhanced. Her reactions weren't just filmed. They were packaged. Sold to viewers who thought they were getting raw drama, when in reality, they were getting emotional distress curated for clicks. And that's where the ethical fog sets in. Was Jasmine out of control? Yes, often. Was she also thrown into a system built to encourage that exact behavior? Until it became inconvenient? Also, yes. This isn't about excusing her choices. Jasmine is a grown adult. She signed on. She cashed the checks. She said the things. But let's not pretend she was operating in a vacuum. She was part of a machine that rewards chaos, amplifies dysfunction, and monetizes breakdowns. And once the machine sensed the chaos might cost it something, it let her fall without a net. People say she knew what she signed up for. But nobody signs paperwork expecting to be silently phased out under a legal shadow with no explanation. No one expects that the platform that once gave them everything will also act like they never existed when things get messy behind the curtain. The truth is, reality TV thrives on people like Jasmine. Emotional, dramatic, willing to go too far on camera. And fans eat it up because it feels unfiltered, even when it's not. What we often don't see is how much of that emotion is pulled, poked, scheduled, and layered with pressure from production. The environment doesn't just catch instability. It sometimes creates it. Then edits it into something marketable. That system only works until someone's real life refuses to stay inside the storyline. Jasmine's disappearance wasn't just a personal collapse. It was also a systemic one. A red warning light about what happens when reality shows build their profit model around vulnerable people whose lives they can feature but not support. She gave them the extremes. When those extremes turned legal, she wasn't valuable anymore. She was a risk. And then, nothing. No thank you. No closure. No public effort at resolution. Just a quiet ghosting that wasn't just personal, it was professional annihilation. The kind that doesn't make headlines, because everyone involved already moved on. So, where does responsibility lie? On one side, you have Jasmine, someone who willingly shared the messiest parts of herself on a global platform. Someone who went back season after season. She wasn't forced. She leaned in. She knew the attention came with consequences. But on the other side, you have an industry that encourages those exact instincts for ratings, then punishes people when those instincts blow up beyond control. Emotional performance makes you a star until it turns into real chaos the network can't air. Then suddenly, the same behavior that made you profitable becomes what makes you disposable. Jasmine might have flipped tables and burned bridges, but the show lit the fuse first. That Valentine's Day episode still haunts the storyline because it's the last time we really saw her. On the surface, it seemed small. They were on vacation, and she asked for separate rooms. But if you watch closely, you felt it. That wasn't temporary tension. That was emotional exhaustion. Defeat that had settled in, not flared up. Gino stood cold. Jasmine sat crushed. The fight didn't escalate. It quietly collapsed. One of the rare moments where no one yelled. And that silence said everything. And now, silence is all we have left. Not because viewers stopped caring, but because the people who could have told the truth decided it wasn't worth protecting anymore. Whether it was legal advice, corporate fear, or reputational control, the choice was the same. Let her vanish. There's a word people use too lightly in reality TV. Storyline. But what Jasmine went through wasn't a storyline. It was her life. And when that life stopped being good for marketing, it was treated like a flawed plot twist. Edited out. Deleted. Forgotten. As if her pain was a production error. And what that tells us is brutal. In this industry, you're only protected as long as you're profitable. She didn't get a reunion segment where she could reclaim the narrative. She didn't get a couch to cry on while producers nodded. She got silence. And silence can be a punishment. That's why this ending doesn't feel like an ending. It feels unfinished. Maybe even rigged. For all the drama she brought into our living rooms, Jasmine left quietly, like someone being ushered out the back door during a black tie event. Not invited back. Not part of the finale. Not even mentioned in the bloopers. So, what's left for someone like her? No cast invites. No visible income. No safe place to speak. Not even the right to explain. The most some fans said was, Well, she was toxic anyway. But here's what they missed. Even if you think she made mistakes, which she did, there's a big difference between criticizing someone's behavior and stripping them of their dignity. Jasmine's story isn't just a mess. It's a mirror. It reflects how quickly we turn loud women into punchlines and how fast production turns those punchlines into problems when they stop being funny. It shows how easily people are built up for public consumption and how brutally they get discarded when the risk outweighs the reward. Was Jasmine ready for reality TV? Arguably not. But was reality TV ready for the damage it did when things went off script? Definitely not. And if you still think this story's over, well, that's by design. Someone, somewhere, decided we weren't supposed to see what came next. But we will. And if you thought this ending was cold, wait till you hear what Gino's been up to behind the scenes. You're not ready for part 3.